In this video, I will walk you through all of the steps to doing a complete valve job on your flathead engine. The tractor that I'm working on today is a 2N Ford, but these techniques will apply if you're working on a 9N, 2N, or a 8N Ford. Any engine that has that flathead style. Now, if you're working on a newer tractor with the overhead valve, these techniques will not apply, and we have a separate tutorial that you'll want to watch for those steps. Now, the reason that we know that this tractor needs a valve job is because when it came to us in this condition, we realized that regular tune-up methods like cleaning the carburetor and making sure the tractor has spark weren't going to get this tractor running. We did a compression test, which I'll show you here, and it just shows that there's only about 30 pounds of pressure here. So that is definitely not going to work for getting the tractor started. There's doors on the side here that you can open up and peek and take a look at the valves and see what's happening, and we have determined that this tractor needs a valve job. Now, we aren't going to take it a step further and also do a complete engine rebuild. We're only going to talk about the valves in this video. So to get started, we'll need to take the hood off the tractor, definitely disconnect your battery. There's bolts up here. Remember that the gas tank stays with the hood, so you'll want to disconnect your gas line probably down here by the carburetor, and then you can remove the hood and get started. Taking off my manifold here. Now, you do notice that I have my exhaust muffler here unclamped so that this can just come right off. And also notice that the carburetor is still on the bottom of our manifold. There's no reason to take that apart there. There is a choke cable on the back of the carburetor that I took off, and also one here that attaches up to the governor, which you'll want to disconnect. Next, we'll take this alternator off, and then we can get into the head. You can peel these gaskets off, and we'll replace those when we reassemble. Then we can look in these doors. There's a nut with a washer there that you can pull off, and then you can look inside the engine and see your valve train. Here you can see that these valves are up right now, but they are stuck up, which we saw earlier when we were diagnosing the tractor, and that's our indication that the valves need to be replaced. Sometimes valves will get stuck just because they set too long. Sometimes there's moisture inside. I'm not sure of the reason for this, but regardless, they're stuck, and so we're gonna work on them. On a 9N or 2N Ford, you'll want to remove this governor rod. You also will have a bracket here for your alternator, possibly, and you can take this tube off for your radiator as well. On the other side of the engine, there is your oil filter with the canister. You can just free that up and leave the oil filter and canister right on the block there, but free it up here at the head. If you're working on an 8N Ford that has a side distributor, your coil will be attached here on the end, so you'll want to remove that so that your head is freed up. Now you can take off all of the bolts that are on your head. Now, if you're working on an 8N Ford, they will be bolts. If you're working on a 9N or a 2N, they'll be studs like you see here. Whatever you have, that's okay. Just take them all out. And then on this tractor, you'll see that some of these just have nuts on the end, like this one, where you can see there's a nut, or this one where the whole entire bolt will come out with the stud there. So there you go. You can notice that the gasket is here, and I used a screwdriver to kind of help pry it up on the other end. If you're working on a 9N or 2N, it's kind of hard because the studs stay in there and you have to pull the head up over the studs, but stick with it, you can do it. At this point, we're going to take our valve assemblies out of the engine block. Now, there's some special tools that you can use to get them out. This is a wrench that is like factory from Ford, probably from the 1930s, and it's a flathead V8 wrench, and it will work on this engine. And if you have access to one of these, maybe if you have a friend that would have a car wrench like that, then you could use it. If you don't, that's okay. Here would be a suggestion, maybe making a screwdriver like this. If you can see, there's a little bit of a tip on it that's cut out with a grinder, just something that we made that you can insert into the port here, and that will give you enough clearance to get your spring loose so that you can pull off your clip. Here's our guide. This is our new guide, but I'll just show you what we're doing. There's a clip up here at the top that is around your guide, and it's recessed up in there. So if you can loosen the tension of the spring, then that will move the guide down ever so slightly so that you can easily pull that clip right out. So that's what we're going to do, and then once the clip is out, then we can pull the whole valve assembly out. So I'm going to set this in here and try to move that spring down a little bit like that, and then I'll just use some pliers to try to get that clip out. There we go. just like that. There's our old clip. It's pretty bent. We'll replace those, of course. And then I'm gonna pull this out. Then I'm gonna use this down at the bottom here a little bit to pry that whole, there we go, pry that whole valve out. Wow, you can see how bad that is. Definitely needs to be replaced. We'll do that to all of the valves here in the motor. You can use a hone like this one to clean out your cylinders where your valves are going to go, and you would definitely want to do that. Now we can talk about the seat, making sure that you're going to have a really good seal when you put your new valves in. Now you don't want to only replace and just put new valves in without doing this step, because you won't get as good of a seal. So you definitely want to take some time and make sure that you're going to have a good seat here. One option would be to take this to a machine shop, which you could definitely do and have your valves professionally done. If yours, when you take this apart and you look at it and it's really bad, then you would want to do that professionally. However, if it's just normal wear and tear, then you could probably do one of these methods and do it yourself and save a little bit of money in your process here. So one step that you could take would be to use a valve seater like this tool. This is New Way brand and it's got the carbide tips on it. You can use one of your old guides like this, and I just sanded it down just a little bit so it would slide in easily so I could go through the whole block here and do them. So I'm going to set my old guide in there just to keep this in the center. Then you can put your tool in here. Oops. There we go. Okay, and then it will drop down. Let me make sure that my guide's going to hold it there for me. There we go. And then you can just wind around. When you start on a new valve, you'll feel it very rough and bumpy. I think my guide just fell down. Let me fix that. Maybe if I go up from the top again. Just gonna, there we go. Okay, so when you first go, it's going to feel really rough and bumpy, but you just want to get all those pits out, and you can keep grinding around until it feels smooth and that it looks good as well. You can visually inspect that. Only grind one way, don't want to go back and forth. Okay, so you can do a method like that until you're ready. Then I'm going to show you another method. I'm going to leave my guide in there and set this tool aside. This is lapping compound, and this is, I have Briggs & Stratton brand lapping compound that I'm using today. So you would just take that on your finger, and with one of your new valves, you would put the lapping compound on the bottom part of the valve, like so. And then you can drop it down into your old guide again, still in there. Make sure that the guide's going to hold it. There we go. And then with your lapping tool, you can get your suction on here, and then you can just grind it back and forth. You can see it going around in there, and you can keep going. Then you can check it. You can pull that out, and you can look at it. You can see how it has made a difference there. You're not having any shiny spots showing again. And again, you can check your seat down here. Now before you reassemble, you definitely want to make sure that you get all the lapping compound cleaned up. So use a rag, get all the lapping compound cleaned up, and make sure that all of your seats here are going to really give you a good seal when you put your engine back together. You'll see here that we are updating the style of valve. This is the old style. It's got the bigger mushroom at the end and a different type of clip at the bottom. And this is the updated look, and that's what we're going to put in the engine, and you would want to update yours as well. So I'm going to set the old one aside, and then I'll show you how to assemble the new ones. First, we'll start with a guide like this, and you'll see that we need to get the seal over the guide. You can stretch it over. It's kind of hard, but you can muscle it over and get it in and down in the guide. Then you can just use a small screwdriver if you need to make sure that that's even all the way around. So once your seals are on the guide, then you can assemble the whole entire valve. Here I have a intake valve, which I'm going to drop down in here like so, and then we'll use a spring. Notice on the springs that the coils are closer together and farther apart. Where they're closer together goes towards the top, towards the head. Okay, so it'll be like that. And then you'd take your retainer, which are different for the intake or the exhaust, but this is what the retainer looks like for the intake, which we're working on here. And then we'll slide it on here to clamp it closed. Nope, just a minute. Okay, there we go. You can clamp it closed like so. And then you'll just take your clips like this. Notice that these are tapered, and the smaller end of the taper is going to go to the top of the valve where the head would be. So I'll put those on here like you can see, and then we'll just close that up. And there's your valve assembly, just like that. Now I'll show you how to do the exhaust. You can notice that the exhaust here is smaller. Once again, I have my guide with the seal on it ready to go. So I'll slide the guide over, and on these we have the different style retainer. Let's put our spring on here first. Again, remember the spring is directional. Then we'll put our retainer in there, and then we'll put it into this clamp and squeeze it like so. These ones I like to use a little bit of grease on just to help hold those C-clips. They're a little harder than those other ones that we did. And we get the other side here, and then we can close it. Perfect, okay? And then we just have the rotator down on the bottom like that. So you'll do that with all of your valves and make them into an assembly. This tractor would have originally came with non-adjustable lifters in it. At some point over the years, they were updated to adjustable lifters, which is a really nice update, and it might be something that you want to do as well if your tractor hasn't been updated previously. So this is an adjustable lifter, and you'll notice that in our block here, they've drilled holes in the bottom, which will help us so that we can hold the lifter still when we turn it and make the adjustment at the top. It's going to prevent the whole entire lifter from spinning around. So with that hole in there, then you can drop your lifter in, and then you can just take a small punch and push it through there, and that's going to hold the lifter still while we make the adjustment. On your exhaust valves, you'll probably want to put a little bit of grease on the very end so that your rotator cap will stay on and not fall off. If you don't put any grease on there, your rotator cap will probably fall off. So with that, you're ready to insert your whole entire valve assembly into the block. I like to put a little bit of lube on it before inserting it in. So I'll do that, and I'll show you outside of the block here what we're going to do too, so you can see. So we'll drop it in, and then once it's into the block, we'll use that screwdriver with the tip on it that I talked to you about earlier, and you can insert it through the port here and push down on the guide here, which will give a little bit of clearance with the spring so that you can get to this groove to put your horseshoe clip in. Now notice that when the clip is in, that the tab will be towards the bottom, which you'll want to do as well. So with that, we're going to drop it in. Notice I did put the lube on, and then your whole valve assembly can drop in like that, and then you can push that down a little bit. Perfect. And go down a little. There we go. Perfect. And then you can drop your clip in there and then release, and it will come back up just like that. And then you can do that throughout your whole entire valve assemblies. Now that all of our valves are in the engine, we're ready to make the adjustment at the bottom. So here I have my punch in the lifter to hold it still like we talked about earlier, and then we can make our adjustment. It's 12 thousandths on the intake and 16 thousandths on the exhaust for this motor. So you can use a guide like this one, or your feeler gauge, and you can slide it in there, and you want it to just fit snugly, and you can use a wrench to make it looser or tighter. This is 7/16 size wrench, and you can make that adjustment. Now you want to make that adjustment when your stroke is on the compression stroke. You can see that both of my valves are down here, so you can move that. Like for example, this one, see how it's up? You would want to make that adjustment now on this valve. You'd want to make it when it's on the compression stroke like this one, when both of the valves are down. So you can move that by putting your PTO in gear, and then you can rotate the PTO like so, and then you'll see that the engine is moving around, and that would be when you wanted to make your adjustment. So do that and go through all of your valves and make sure that they're at the proper gap. At this point in your repair job, you'd probably want to do some further inspection to your engine and see if there's more repairs that you want to do besides just the valve train. You can feel your sleeve and see if there's any ring groove. Ours is really smooth, it feels good, so we're not going to go any further in repairing the engine. However, if you decide that you want to, now would be the time, since you've already done this amount of work to get the head off and everything. Steiner does sell a complete engine rebuild video which goes through all of those steps, which you could purchase if you need coaching to go further into your engine. So with that, we're going to put our head gasket on. You'll notice that your head gasket is directional. The smooth side goes towards the black, and then there's a lip on this top side that's going to face up. So I'm going to set this down carefully on here. I'm going to go all the way down those studs. Just going to try to set it down evenly. You'll see that I did spray this with copper coat so that we can get a good seal on it. I'm stuck on this one stud here. Let's go back off and try again. There we go. Still stuck here. There we go. Okay, so get this all the way down, and then we're ready to drop the head on. I did clean up the head really good, as well as the surface on the block, so that we can get a good seal there. So that's that. And then we'll set our head on. Going the right way. Just like so. There we go. At this point, you'll want to make sure that your head bolts are tightened to the right amount of torque. For a studded engine, like what I'm working on, you want to have 55 pounds. If you're working on an 8N engine, which has bolts, then you'd want to tighten it to 65 pounds of torque. You'll see that we do have the doors here back on the front of the engine. We have the bracket here for the alternator, and the wire loom is on top here. Also this linkage for the governor, or that rod there. So I'm going to go back and just double check these, tighten them up to that 55 pounds of torque. When you do this, you want to start in the middle and work your way out. You can follow in the manual. There's a specific order that they want you to tighten your head bolts up in, and you can follow that. But always remember, start in the middle and work your way out. We're putting the manifold back on the tractor. We did put new gaskets behind there, which you'll want to do as well. Make sure when you put your nuts back on the tractor that they're brass. That's how they should be. And we'll tighten these up, and our manifold will be on. Then we'll button everything else back up on the tractor. We got some linkages with the choke and the governor. Of course, we'll put the alternator back on and the hood, and we'll be ready to start it up and see it run. Our valve job is complete and the tractor is back to running well. I hope that the 2 steps in this video are helpful to you when you do the valve job on your own tractor. You're welcome to watch many other tutorials covering different makes and models of tractors at steinertractor.tv.